but inside I can't find that button that says stop worrying. If there was a button, it'd be broke right now for me just, you know. Or my ribs or the button would be broke, one of them. So we talk a good talk, but the goal of the Christian life is to go to church and say, Pastor, I needed that. Pastor, my prayer life needs a boost. Pastor, my faith, actually, you don't need to address me, address the Lord. He's looking for faith. I want to have what He's looking for, don't you? I want to have what He's looking for. And then He shifts gears. In the same frame, but shifts gears. And he spoke this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous. That is an obvious statement of self-righteousness, self-piety, definitely aiming at the Pharisees of his day, those who attacked him. And they had the double-edged pride thing going here. One is, they trusted in themselves that they were righteous, and they despised others. One translation says they viewed others with contempt. They saw themselves as the role models. They looked up to themselves and looked down on most other people. And they were wrong on both counts. And Jesus had a tough job. He had to try to convince the people that He was the Messiah, and He had to go against the grain of the religious leaders who got away from God's Word, who led people astray, and He had to let people know they don't have a clue what they're talking about. And at the same time, come across Christian. Grace and truth, right? And so He tells this story. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. We would not be surprised by anything in that statement. That's where you'd go to pray. That was the place of prayer. That was not, there's nothing wrong about that. We have people, I get calls periodically and say, Pastor, is it okay if I come to the church and pray? I said, of course. Let me make sure nobody's in there. We're not doing anything, and check with our maintenance guys. But I'm not going to say, pray, just pray where you are. They could do that. They have done that. But there is something special about the place you gather together to meet God. There really is. Especially in that day when God's promised presence would be in the temple. Didn't mean that was the only place He was, but He promised to be there, that He would meet you there. So there's nothing strange about this. One a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. And if you would have stopped right now and asked the people, where do you think this story is going? They would have said, probably, the Pharisee is going to, God's going to give us a model on who to look up to. We need to pray like those religious Pharisees. That's not what Jesus is going to say. And if you've read the Gospel of Luke, and if you go back and look, when the word tax collector comes up, it's the 5th time in Luke's Gospel that the word tax collector is mentioned. Because Jesus came for those that people gave up on. And here it is, folks. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself. I would like to tell you what that means, but I have no idea. What do you mean he prayed to himself? Well, what does it mean to pray to yourself? I mean, he's got it all wrong from the beginning. And he says, he starts with God and he leaves God in the dust. I wonder how many of us do that in our prayer. Listen to this. God, I thank you that I am not like other men. That's why I called the sermon Thanksgiving Pride. I thank you that I'm not like other people. I'm better than them. I'm more devout. I'm more generous. I am what they need to be. And I'm thankful that I am the standard. And he didn't, even in his own prayer, those Pharisees didn't see themselves the way God saw them. I'm not an extortioner. I don't rob. Is he not robbing God of his due honor, even as he speaks? I'm not unjust. I'm fair. I'm not an adulterer. or even as this tax collector. I'm not like him. You know the religious world's upside down when the religious leaders of the day say, I'm not like him, and Jesus is about to say, you need to start being like him. The people they despised were the ones they should look up to. Pharisee can learn something from that guy. The pastor can learn something from that guy. Nothing's sweeter than being in the presence of a humble person and hearing a genuine prayer, especially for me when they're a new believer and they really don't even know, they don't know the words. But the sincerity flows from their heart, and you just want to bottle that up. I'm thankful that I'm not like other people. That's a horrible, horrible thing to do to Thanksgiving, is to turn it into pride. And listen to verse 12. I fast twice a week. I am a man of sacrifice. I'm a man of spiritual discipline, God. I want to make sure you know that. Twice a week. You do the math. That's a lot. That's impressive. He was impressed by that. I give tithes of all that I possess. Everything I get, I give a portion to God, because I'm a generous man. I wonder how many people heard him say that prayer, which violates the spirit of prayer, right? And the tax collector, by the way, the first guy says a lot, but he doesn't say much. Talks a lot, but doesn't say much. Something preachers are accused of every once in a while. But then you've got this other guy who doesn't say much, but says a lot. Here it is, folks. It's not. I've got no wow for you today. What I've given you is simple. It's not easy. And the tax collector, standing afar off, he did not draw near, he did not draw other prayers, he stood aloof. And we can spend a little time wondering why he was aloof. I'd say we would know he would not be welcomed with the Pharisee, he would not be welcome in the proximity of those other prayers. He stood where he probably thought he could pray without distraction. But there's humility in that. In everything this man does, there's humility. He stands afar off. Though he goes to the temple, he doesn't need prime location. He didn't need to be in the prime space, in the prime spot, so others could hear him. And he would not so much as raise his eyes to heaven. His head was down because of his humility. I said to you last week, you can pray this way. Jesus did. You can pray with your head up, your hands up in the air. You can pray a lot of different postures. That's not the issue at all. But for him, he's not doing it wrong. He has the freedom to stand afar off. He has the freedom to lower his head in honor of his God. It says he beat his breast. Something moved him. He was moved, physically moved. This wasn't an act. This wasn't a show. You don't see many people praying this way. And he said, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Prayer's over.